everybody, and welcome to the Season 14 premiere of Golf Talk Live. I'm Ted Odorico, and we're kicking off another incredible year of expert instruction and industry insights. Whether you're looking to shave strokes off your game or hear from some of the visionaries shaping the courses we play, you're in the right place. Tonight, we're dialing in your game with our first Coach's Corner of the season, followed by an exclusive sit-down with one of architecture's most innovative minds, Augie Pisa. If you want to look into where to tune into the show this season, you can go to the iGolf Sports Network YouTube channel to see the video version, or you can also check it out on Spotify. And if you just want to sit back and relax and you just want to hear the audio version, you can go to Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, or any really of your favorite platforms. You can check it out there. And I want to ask you this question before we get into the show tonight. Isn't it time that you stop chasing a textbook swing and start playing to your natural strengths? Well, tonight on Coach's Corner, our guest coach helps break down the 3 Ps of power, the secret habits behind shooting a 59, and how to simulate Sunday pressure on a Tuesday afternoon. So let me introduce our coach for tonight. Joining me tonight on Coach's Corner is Michael Wheeler. He's a PGA professional with over 15 years experience and currently the director of instruction at Maryland Golf and Country Clubs. Michael is a multi-year Golf Digest Best Young Teacher and one of Golf Tips Magazine's top 25 instructors in America. And from coaching tour pros to completing at the D1 level himself, he brings elite expertise as a bioswing dynamics and a swing catalyst certified expert. And I'm excited to have him back on the show this season. So, Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ted. Thanks for having me again. Excited to get the year started.
I appreciate it. Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Michael came on board as one of our top instructors with Golf Tips Magazine, and we're going to do a lot of great things this year. He's going to be putting some great articles and videos together for us as the season progresses, and he's also going to be jumping in on many Coach's Corner sessions this season, so I'm really excited to have him back this year. All right, so Michael, I'm going to start things off, and I've kind of categorized these a little bit, and I'm going to sort of just lay it out there, and then I want you to just basically hit it out down in the middle of the fairway, if you don't mind, for the listeners out there. We really want to try to help this season on Coach's Corner. It's not just about hearing ourselves talk. It's about really giving some nuggets, if you will, to help a lot of the folks out there that want to improve this season. So the first one we're going to talk about is really the foundation of the game. And that is, what are the 3 most important fundamentals, I guess, for you as a coach to screen before players hitting the first tee? What are some of the things that you really want to make sure that they're dialing in before they're teeing it up the first time?
Yeah, so, spring is here. So those in the Northeast, we had a rough winter. So getting the body loosened up again. If you haven't been traveling to be able to play golf, because we have, we're simulator golf, but even still, it's not the same. Yeah. So you got to make sure the body is loose first of all. So having some sort of warm-up routine on the range, getting the shoulders loosened up, get the hips loosened up, get the back loosened up. So preventing injury is number one, obviously, right? You don't want to play golf with pain. So warming up, just like going to the gym, you would not go to the gym and immediately try and hit your one rep PR. You would work your way up to that weight. Same thing on the golf course. So many people go to the range and the first club they grab is the driver. Longest club in the bag, you swing the club the fastest. Take your time, build up to that. But as far as, making sure they're doing things for their swing, seeing a TPI specialist is one thing that I would highly recommend doing. Bioswing dynamics is another assessment that I use to find preferences and, using each individual structure, wingspan versus height, upper arm versus lower arm lengths, to see where should the club fall on 2-dimensional video. So making sure that, that's done. You're warmed up, you have a swing that matches you. And, just maybe the other thing would just be trying to find a golf swing throughout this early part of the season that balances power and safety, we'll say, right? So you don't want to swing so hard that you're risking injury. We've already, we've discussed that, but, making sure that you're doing it safely and you're doing it in a way that matches your body, that, based around your individual needs and preferences.
Yeah, and it's really all about, especially early in the season, about preparation. And we're going to talk about that here in just a second, about the round itself. But as you're alluding to here, is you want to prepare for the season. So you don't want to just, if you've been a couch potato for a couple of months, maybe you haven't gone to an indoor simulator to work on your game through the winter months. Maybe you've been watching a little bit of hockey or what have you. and all of a sudden you're getting ready, things are warming up a bit, you're wanting to get outside, you want to be able to make sure that you're ready to do so, not just start playing the game. So you got to do some things to get warmed up. As you said, it's a good idea to check with your coach to make sure if they're not TPI certified, they certainly can put you in contact with somebody that is, and you can work together to develop a good plan. So I think that's a good foundation to begin with. And then, of course, pressure in the round itself, you want to get ready for that. So again, it's sort of, as I led into earlier, talked about sort of that Sunday afternoon round, if you will. So from a listener's perspective, how can they simulate that pressure that they would normally have on a Sunday afternoon? They're out with their buddies, or maybe they're playing in a club championship or what have you a little bit later on in the season. How can they simulate that pressure during their practice round?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think most importantly is trying to simulate it even before you even tee it up, right? A lot of times people, especially new to competitive golf, will not experience quote unquote pressure golf until they're in that situation. Right. Yes, they've swung a golf club. Yes, they understand their grip, they understand their posture. That's all important. Being good at the mundane things, right? Grip, posture, alignment, ball position, taking care of the variables and trying to eliminate as many as possible. But you need to put yourself in that position more often. So playing games on the range. So, 3 different types of practice. I think we've talked about that in previous years: block practice, variable practice, and then using games to prepare. The games are where you're going to really simulate that pressure. So let's just take putting, for example. Mm-hmm. Having, set a number, maybe, you're trying to make 20 putts in a row from 4 feet, just throwing numbers out there, right? So once you get closer to that number, closer to the 20, you're going to start to feel like, all right, well, I want to make sure I don't have to start, because if you miss, you start all over again. And you can even say, like, barring you don't have kids to go home to or something crazy, you can't leave until you accomplish the goal of whatever game you're playing. So let's just say it's 20 or 25 putts in a row. Once you get to 15, 16, 17, and then finally your last putt, like going through your full pre-shot routine and striking the putt and letting it go in, like those are the ways that you're going to simulate that stress. So the other way you can do it, like, if you're going out and playing a practice round, something that happens under stress, your heart rate goes up, your breathing increases. You might even, depending on how nervous you are, you might even lose a little bit of feeling in your fingertips because your breathing and heart rate is increased. Right. That's just a normal physiological response. So simulating that, sometimes I'll have my juniors, when they get to the ball, do some jumping jacks, do some push-ups, do something low impact that just gets the heart rate going, gets the breathing going, and then start your pre-shot routine, do your breath work, try to consciously slow your breathing down, which will then in turn slow your heart rate down, and practicing your routine, because your routine is how you're going to get over those pressure situations, and sticking with a consistent routine. So, any sort of way you can just simulate that feeling of getting your heart rate up and getting your breathing up. And then, the other obvious way would just be to play some, little matches with your friends and put something on the line. It doesn't have to be money. You can say, hey, loser does 25 push-ups, something that means something. You don't really want to do it. So that way there's consequences. Right. Recreational golf, there's some consequences. Yeah, you might lose a ball in the water. Who cares? Yeah. But competitive golf, pressure golf, breaking your personal best, breaking 80 for the first time, breaking 70 for the first time, breaking 100 for the first time, you're going to feel the jitters. Don't be afraid of the jitters. Just embrace them and enjoy the process. Focus on that process.
Yeah, that's a great point, because, again, it doesn't always have to be about money. I mean, a lot of players will, a lot of our amateurs will go out there and, they'll play some skins or what have you. And, they put a few dollars on there and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But I think sometimes you need to up the ante a little bit, and maybe not always make it just about the money. But like you said, maybe you throw some push-ups in there, maybe add a lunch on there or something else as well. Or maybe you're going to, buy the drinks at the 19th hole. And so there's other things that you can add on, to make it a little bit more interesting. So, be creative, I think, is the way you want to look at it as well.
Yeah, think about what Lee Trevino said years ago. You don't know pressure until you play golf with money you don't have.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So, that's pressure.
I remember when he said that, and he was exactly right. Yeah. There was a lot of times he did that where he he played and didn't have a nickel in his pocket. And he said, I gotta get it done because I don't know what I'm going to do if I lose. So, and he didn't lose. So there was obviously a method to his madness. You touched on practice, Nat, and I want to get you to sort of lay this out, because this is where a lot of people miss the boat. It's important to get out there and practice. You talked about everybody always wanting to bring out the big stick and just, see how far they can hit it out there. And that's a lot of fun when you're just playing around. But, if you really want effective practice, you've got to put a proper practice routine. And I'm not talking about a practice session with your coach. I'm talking about your own practice session. So what is a proper, maybe a 30, 45 minute practice session look like in your mind? So if you were going to cater one for one of your students that really wanted to improve this season, what's that? And you can do 30 minutes, it doesn't have to be 45. What's that can consist of? What percentage is going to be dedicated to a certain part of the game and other parts, Nat? So kind of lay it out for us. What do you want them working on for that time?
So I hate to say the typical answer, but it does depend a little bit, right? So it depends on what that player needs in that moment, right? So a lot of times you go and you practice and they hit driver and they hit the clubs they want to hit because they hit them well. And they're not practicing their weaknesses. The goal of practice is to learn something, right? So John Dunnigan talks a little bit about, the learning doesn't happen in the lesson. The learning happens between lessons when you're trying to ingrain whatever it is that you're trying to do, right? So practice is something, honestly, we can talk about for a multi-hour discussion.
The whole show itself.
Yeah, exactly. So if I had 30 minutes and only 30 minutes, I would take a couple minutes and make sure you have some sort of dynamic warm up, get the body loosened up, especially if coming from work and you have limited time and whatnot. But I would try to make the practice time frame mimic the percentages on the golf course, right? So in a typical, let's just say for your average golfer, 80 to 90 is most of our average golfers. Only 14 at most of those shots are driver, assuming you don't hit one out of bounds and you got to tee it up again, right? But So in a perfect world, 14 is the max driver that you're going to hit. So, what is that, 20% of the round? So maybe 20% of the practice be driver. A third of your strokes, a quarter to a third of your strokes is putting. So maybe devote, let's just say 10 minutes or so of that 30 to putting. And I focus on the important distances. That 5 to 12 feet range is huge. And outside, say 30 to 40, working on distance control, but always varying the target. Never hit the same putt twice.
Yeah, you want to work on light putting.
Yep, absolutely. So if you're working on stroke, typically, in my opinion, based on a lot of research, the best distance is 10 feet, because if you're too close, you can have the face a little open or a little closed and you'll still make the putt. You're not getting appropriate feedback. Dead straight 10-foot putt, it doesn't take more than a couple of degrees. I think it's 1 degree, open or closed, to miss that putt. So you really will get some feedback of, okay, I'm consistently missing it right, or I'm consistently missing it left, or it's just all over the place. But make sure the most important part to me is tracking your practice. Don't just go out there and bang ball after ball. Take your time. If you go to a PGA Tour driving range, I was just down at Bay Hill on Tuesday for the day. And, these guys do not hit ball. They take their time. They hit a ball, they back off, they talk a little bit, they check their grip, they check their alignment, they check their ball position. They're checking that, like I said earlier, the mundane stuff, the boring stuff. They're making sure that's really good. So making sure that your fundamentals in that practice session are really, really good. So to backtrack a little bit, I say a couple minutes of a warm up, maybe 5 to 10 minutes focusing on only setup, grip, posture, alignment. Maybe throw an alignment rod down and maybe let that be your block practice per se. And then throw some variable practice, change clubs, change targets, change lies if you can. If you can hit out of the rough, hit out of the rough. Just change something. Maybe bang a few drivers, see how your drives are going. But again, change targets. Go through your pre-shot routine. Check your grip, all that stuff, and then finish up with some short game and some putting.
Yeah, I know. And as you said, we could really expand on that and get into specifics. But again, it's going to depend on the level of player. I mean, obviously, the more accomplished player, you're going to, they've already, they're already striking the ball well. there may be certain areas of their game that they're really losing a few strokes on, so they're going to dial in on those specifics a little bit more. But as a general rule, what you just laid out is really applicable for most players, I think, that want to get a little bit better, is have sort of a general practice session. The one thing that I would always say to people is, if you've got specific things that you're working on that your coach has put you in tune with and saying, I want you to work on these specific drills, that's the time to work on a practice session. And I'm talking a warm up before you go out and play that particular day, because you want to take whatever you've got that day. You don't want to, and that's one thing you always see the pros do, is they don't start monkeying around. Now, Tiger, as an example, would go after the round if there was some things that were not, he was pretty good. He could tweak it on the course. People wouldn't even know he did it. But the truth of the matter is, he said if there was something specific that he knew that he couldn't fix right then and there, he would go after the round and he'd go and basically iron it out. So, that's the time, if you're going to monkey around with things, is when you're doing a normal practice routine. If you're just doing a warm up before a round, you don't want to be messing with things then. That's something to work with your coach, and that the next time you get together.
Yeah, I think one thing real quick, if I may,
sure.
Really important with practice is tracking your practice. There's again, John Dunnigan and Will Wu have an app out called Practice Coach. It is probably the best one out there for practice specific stuff. You enter some information in and it gives you, kind of spits out some things for practice and how to do it. But tracking your practice, like, using a notebook, I keep a marble notebook in my bag. Mm-hmm. And I track every practice I have, even if it's just 5 minutes of putting. I say, all right, I did X, Y, Z. I felt this, I did this worked, this didn't work. Because sometimes what didn't work is just as important. But track that practice every single time, even if it takes 5 minutes to write everything down, just or a note in your phone, something to track it, and you can go back and you can talk to your coach, say, hey, I've been struggling with this over the last few weeks. I need help with this. But tracking your stats, tracking your practice is super important.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because that was going to be the next thing that we were going to bring up, was really tracking your progress. And that is, I wanted to find out from you what specific stats truly measure improvement for amateurs, because there's a lot of stats. If you get on a TrackMan or you get on some of these other devices, there's a lot of stats there, and they're all important. Don't get me wrong, but there's really only a handful that really, for most average golfers. Now, the coaches are going to look at other things, but for the golfers, there's really a few that they need to be mindful of and to make note of. So talk about not just the numbers, but what stats. You mentioned about recording it, and maybe this app is going to do something that John is coming out with. But what's really the important stats that people need to be really mindful of as they're putting that information together?
Yeah, at a basic level, keeping fairways hit, and also, did you miss it left or right? That is really important. Greens hit, did you miss it left, right, short, or long, or anywhere in the middle? And total putts, and I would usually say track how long your first putt was and what the distance of the putt that you made was. I think the best app out there to track your stats is Decade, Scott Fawcett's app and program. It will spit out so much information, and there's a simple way of entering your stats, and there's a more complex way of entering your stats. It takes a little bit longer, but Decade is 100% the best system out there for tracking your on-course stats, and then being able to say, okay, and they use a strokes gained approach of how to, where did I lose strokes, where did I gain strokes, and then you can take those statistics and, let's just say you missed 75% of the greens you missed left. Okay, well, was it a pull left, was it curving left? And then you can take that information to your coach and say, hey, here's my stats, here's why I'm missing it, here's, on average, this is where it's going. And we can take that and then look at the data we're getting in the lesson, whether it be TrackMan data, swing catalyst, force plate data, 3D motion capture data, whatever it is that we have, and say, okay, what's the culprit for what's causing those misses, and how do we fix it?
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to move on to something else I know you're very familiar with. You've talked about this in the past, and we've talked a little bit about it, and I know you're very familiar with what I'm about to bring out. And that's the sort of the bioswing dynamics. A lot of people get into the biomechanics now of the swing, and I want people to understand how their natural body movement prevents, how understanding the natural body movement sort of prevents that one size fits all trap. This is something that it was a little bit of a pet peeve for me with a lot of coaches over the years. And I understand why, but years ago, it was sort of the one size fits all coach, getting the students to swing everybody the same and not being mindful of the different body types. But as we're learning through technology now and understanding of how the body actually works, that one size fits all isn't really the end all be all anymore. So maybe you can unpack that a little bit without getting too technical, because I don't want to lose the audience, but just to maybe explain a little bit more about what we're meaning by that and how the newer sort of modern golf swing is more focused on you as an individual and not so much on let's put you in this box.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at the PGA Tour, for example, you got 120 different players or more sometimes. And most of the time you get 120 different looking golf swings.
Yep.
Yes, they do similar things, right? They all hit the little ball before the big ball. They can control that path and the face angle to curve the ball how they want. But overall, I mean, as an overall look, they all look different. There's reasons why that is personal preferences. Many times it's based on your structure, based on your body, how you like to turn. I mentioned earlier, forearm length versus upper arm length, wingspan versus height. So let's take forearm versus upper arm, for example. We're using video many times to work on a golf swing and analyze a golf swing and say, oh, well, you're over the top or you're stuck under the plane, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. Just taking a simple measurement of forearm versus upper arm can tell me if that club should look a little, quote unquote, steeper or be a little more shallow. So for me, for example, my forearm is 2 inches longer than my upper arm. It's just, you are what you are. That's what I am. So when I am playing my best, I draw a plane line up from the club up through the hosel, up through my elbow at address. And typically my golf club will come down about an inch or two above that line. So if you think about it from two-dimensional video, the longer the forearm, the more the club will be out here. The shorter it is, It will be back here. So it will look more shallow, or the club will get a little lower at the top and sit lower at the top. So that's just one example, just pelvis turn. How do you like to turn? Maybe you're doing it because you have a hip injury. Maybe you're doing it because you have an ankle injury. Mm-hmm. And then making sure your foot flare matches how you want to turn your hips, stance width, alignment, just, again, the simple stuff, right? The stuff we can control every single swing. Once the club starts, there's so many factors. It's very hard to control a club moving at 100 miles an hour or faster.
Right.
But controlling the grip and make sure the grip, the right hand position matches how the right arm wants to move. Making sure that the plane line we're trying to get is right for that person. And then you have a blueprint to go off of. And then you just try and mold the swing to that blueprint, and then let the ball tell you if you're right or wrong. Sometimes you get to where you think is right and the ball's not doing what you want. You need to tweak it a little bit. So, but at least 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, you're right there. You're in the ballpark. And then just let the golf ball tell you what you need to do.
Yeah, and this is where a lot of the technology really comes into play, and we'll mention a little bit about that here in just a second. But this is where a lot of this technology can really help, because it gives you a lot of feedback on certain things with your body. It can really tell you, the technology is such now, it can pretty much tell you what you're doing wrong. And it's not a matter of just in the wrong position, but it's telling you whether you're weight shifting correctly, or whether you're, holding back or what have you. So there's a lot of data points now that can be picked up through a lot of the products and processes that are available now to golf coaches. And it's really not something that we have to get into great detail, because I think unfortunately, a lot of amateurs get into the weeds with it because the coach gets too technical. And that's why I try to keep it as simple as possible. But I think it's important that people do understand that they really need to again, when they're working with their coach, to find out, whether it's getting on, something like TrackMan, whether it's, using the plates through Swing Catalyst, something like that, to get that data feedback so they can better understand how their body's working. And I know that you're very well trained in a lot of that, and that has served you well in your teaching. So I think that's something that, moving forward, that we're going to get better and better at as technology tightens up. I want to talk for a second about mindset. As we mentioned at the top of the show, we're early in the season for a lot of people. And I want to ask you this question: is how much of the early season struggle is mental versus physical?
Early season, it can be more physical than later in the season, in my opinion, just because you might not have done a whole lot of activity for the last few months. And golf is a degenerative trait. If you don't use it, you will lose it.
Yeah.
So, getting the reps in is definitely important. But, there is something to be said, for watching, let's just say watching YouTube golf, for example, and you see Grant Horvath never miss a darn fairway,
Yeah.
over and over again. And you're just used to seeing that ball flight. You're used to seeing,
Right.
and in your mind, you're like, man, this is simple. And then you get out there and it may not be the case.
Right.
But, there is something to be said for watching good players play and oversimplifying some of this stuff, picking a target and just swinging to it and just going, whatever happens is going to happen. Maybe adjust your line. If your typical shot shape is a fade, adjust your line. But, from a mental standpoint, I think is, just matching expectations with reality. Because sometimes you can, spend the winter watching golf on TV, no matter where that is, and be like, all right, man, this it's just a little ball. The hole's on, there. It's a stick. It's a ball. It's not that hard. Well, in theory, it's not that hard. Hitting the ball is easy. Getting the ball to go straight is hard. Right. So, so just matching that, and then, just going out there and having fun. Make sure, if you're not playing golf for a living, it's really not that big of a deal. If you have a bad round, your buddies are going to get on you about it for a few days, and then they're going to have a bad round and they're going to have somebody else to mess with. So it is not a big deal. Go out, have fun, enjoy the weather, enjoy being outside, enjoy your time with your family if you're playing with your kids or whatever. But oversimplify things. Get out there, get the reps in, practice the right way. Just when you go play golf, have fun, pick a target and swing to it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And just a quick thing on technology, because I know we've already discussed a little bit, but I think that we want the casual golfer to certainly be aware of some of the data points, as we touched on a few of them there. But at the same time, you want them to avoid falling into that paralysis by analysis. I mean, there's a lot of guys that just love the stats, and I get it. That's, they want to geek out with all the stats, and there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, if you get too, this is what turned a lot of more seasoned golfers away from the game for a while, especially pre-COVID, because they were just getting burnt out with all the statistics and all the numbers coming at them. So I think you got to find a balance, right? What's the balance in your opinion to having access to certain data through, again, with your coach and instruction, and not getting too caught up in it?
Yeah. Technology is only as good as the person using it, right? So take a doctor, for example. You hurt your ankle, you go to a doctor, is like, I don't know what's going on. Here's, do an assessment, see, here's what I think's going on, but we're going to go get an MRI and get it checked out. The MRI does not fix you. The MRI just tells you what's wrong, and then the doctor fixes you.
Right.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. Right. But that's the same way in golf instruction, in my opinion. The technology, the TrackMan, it's a beautiful thing, but it doesn't fix you. It just tells you what you just did.
Yeah.
In an unbiased, very objective way. Same thing with Swing Catalyst. Doesn't fix you. It just tells you what you were doing with the ground, right?
Right.
So, I think, and again, let's use a tour player, for example. Bay Hill's a fun week. I forget who they were interviewing. Either way, it might have been Justin Thomas. When he's warming up before a round, if he has the TrackMan on, he does not have all those numbers blasted on there. He is very simply hitting to a number, trying to hit his carry numbers and seeing, okay, my swing feels good today. I'm hitting my numbers pretty well. Maybe he'll adjust his game plan for that day accordingly. Or maybe he just goes out there and plays with his game plan. If he's hitting his lines really good after a few holes, he might tighten it up a little bit. But keep it super simple. There is a time. There's a time and a place for some people to get in the weeds. It can be fun to talk about the golf swing. I like in my teaching, I try to keep things as simple as possible. Let's explain it in this, few words. This right here is one of the best training aids out there.
Oh yeah.
Tape. They're not getting the left shoulder around enough.
Yep.
Put some tape on them. Get the tape to your chin, or something external that can do it. Super simple, and then you can take Sports Box or some sort of 3D motion capture and say, okay, well, what was my shoulder turn? And quantify it in that way, right? So using technology as a way to track progress, as a way to identify flaws, opportunities for improvement, but don't rely on it. Don't be out there saying, oh man, my path is 3.8 degrees to the right and I want it 2.1 degrees to the right in order to play well today. No, you don't. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Just warm up and go
Get it in
play.
the hole.
Yeah.
Bottom line is get it in the hole. Yeah. Okay. Well, then you don't care if it's, 3.9 or 2.1.
Exactly. So, some players do like to see a couple more numbers out there. One of the tour players I work with, he liked to see, with driver, he liked to see his angle of attack.
Yep.
He just wanted to make sure his tendency was to hit up a lot. So he wanted to make sure that he wasn't hitting up a ton. So he would tweak setup a little bit based on some stuff that we were working on if he was hitting up again, just to get that ball launching in the window that he wanted to see. So that's just one example. But, just keep it super simple, hit your numbers, and then after the round, maybe use the technology to say, all right, well, I was missing left. Let's see if we can find out what's going on, track stuff. But real quick, the only other way that I really like to use technology, I might have mentioned this last year, but I call it swing banking. When you're playing really well, go to your coach and get on as much stuff as you can get. Capture the 3D data, get on force plates, get the TrackMan data. So that way, let's say 3 months from now, you are not playing well. You can go back, get on that stuff, and you can compare the two. And a lot of times you will see very quickly what changed. Yeah, could even be as simple as stance width.
Yeah, you're setting a benchmark is really what you're doing
100%
early on. Yeah, I think that's smart. And see, that's what I'm talking about is you can set a benchmark, when you're playing your best, as you said. You've got all that information, that data there, your coach has got it. And then if something happens and things start going awry throughout the season, you can get on that equipment again and then find out, okay, what's changed since, the first time you were on it. And that way you've got, as I said, a benchmark to work with. So again, I agree. I think there's a time and a place when it's appropriate. And then there's sometimes where people just get, as I said, get too caught up on it. All right, I want to move on. Short game focus, driver or putter for quick results. What is your go-to drill? So driver or putter, if you want to get quick results and game improvement, what are you going to focus on more, the driver or the putter? And do you have a go-to drill that you like to use?
So player dependent a little bit. However,
I know
stats will say that the driver is more important than the putter, believe it or not. So that is something that Scott Fawcett found in the billions of data that he got from years of PGA Tour statistics. So yes, putting is extremely important, right? 4 to 5 feet to 4-ish, 5-ish feet to 12 feet, super important. If you can make more of those, the 50% make rate on the PGA Tour is 8 feet. Right. So, a lag putt that goes to 6 feet versus 3 feet will save you so many strokes. So getting that distance control and getting your feel down is super important. From a strokes game perspective, yes, driver, the further you can hit it, the better. Now do it safely, but the further and more accurately you can get it. But sometimes the right play is to hit it down there as far as you can, even if it's in the rough. So that's where tracking your stats and then using the Decade app to plan your rounds are very, very important. So go-to drill, for putting, I think, there's so many. I think around the world is really good from 4 feet or so. So that way you're never hitting the same putt twice. And it's always changing breaks and you're far enough away where you're going to get feedback. It's not an easy little, 2 or 3 foot kick in, make it challenging for your skill level. And then driver, I think, maybe doing a 14 ball challenge. So you're hitting the number of drivers you would hit in the round, give yourself a fairway, each shot, change it up a little bit, change your angles, and go through your full pre-shot routine and hit it and just keep track in your notebook or whatever you're tracking, to play that game and work on your driver. So I think those 2 little games are probably the best ones. But short game as a whole, I think, is where most people will save a lot of strokes.
Sure.
Though, yeah. So playing 21, that's my favorite short game. So you play 9 holes, you bring a wedge and a putter, 1 golf ball. You pick a spot around the green, hit your pitch shot, go up and putt it out, keep track. 21 is equivalent to 6 up and downs and 3 down and threes. So that's PGA Tour average, which is 66 and a sixth up and down percentage. So if you shoot 21 or better, you are at or better than PGA Tour average for up and down percentage. So practicing that and then taking that same thing. So when you miss a green on the golf course, you can be like, okay, just playing 21. Let's get up and down and go from there.
Yeah, great advice. Yeah, I think it's, you got to make it interesting and you got to make it fun, and you got to find ways to challenge yourself while you're out there. And that's that's something too you can do with a buddy. You can both go up there and put that into practice and become a little bit better as you progress through the season. So if there was one elite habit that amateurs could steal from a pro's routine, what would it be?
So pre-round routine or during the round?
No, that they could. No, it could be just a habit that they could take from a pro's routine. And yeah, I guess it would be obviously be pre-round. So it would be, what can they steal? What's that one elite habit that they do that they could steal and hopefully will help their game?
I 100% think it's getting good at the mundane, getting good at the boring stuff. Scotty Scheffler, what does he use? First club out of the bag. Every single time. He's got that club with the molded grip. He's been using it since he was a kid with Randy Smith. So, making sure that you are taking out as many variables as you possibly can. Taking out the variable of ball position. Make sure your ball position is correct. Make sure your grip is correct. Make sure your stance width is correct. Getting good at the boring stuff. These guys are so good at the boring stuff that it makes the game so much easier. So, really honing in on the fundamentals. And, next time our listeners are at a PGA Tour range, spend a couple hours there, watch them hit balls, time the time frame from one ball to the next. Most of the time it's 1 to 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. They are not rushing. They are taking their time. Now, I know everybody doesn't have that kind of time, but making sure before you hit that golf ball, you are lining that grip up. You are lining the club face up, placing your hands on the club properly, getting some sort of routine of how to place my feet relative to the ball for the club that I'm hitting. I think the habit of just proper practice and proper setup and basic fundamentals is, there's nothing they can do that's more important than that. And then once you're good at that, then we can get into the weeds with some other stuff.
Yeah, and you know what? Nicklaus famously talked about that's what he worked on every season coming out. He worked on the fundamentals. He said it was the most important part of his game was to get his fundamentals down right each and every season. And 18 majors later, he's still in the number one spot as far as winning majors. So Tiger's come close, but and certainly a lot of people can argue that he has been the number one for compared to Nicklaus, but. I think both of them would agree that the fundamentals are where you need to be focused on. And I think that's just, some good advice, especially this early in the season. We want to get people out there. We want to get them, prepared as best as we can. And that's what we're going to do here this season on the Coach's Corner panel. We're going to walk them through the season, get them ready in preparation for a new year. And then as we go through, we're going to guide them along, and hopefully they're going to play their best golf yet. So, Michael, thank you for joining me on an interesting Coach's Corner to start the season off. Really appreciate it. Not a problem. So some incredible insights from Michael to get our season started. We're going to take a quick break here, step aside for a moment, as you will, to hear a word from our premium sponsors who helped to make this show possible. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.